Hello, and welcome to the Psych Tech at Work podcast. I am your host, Charles Handler, coming to you live from the UNIVAC studios here in beautiful New Orleans, Louisiana. And what a guest I have today. Somebody I've known for a really long time, someone who most of you in the field of IO psychology, folks, and probably even beyond. Someone who is, for the first time ever, my new coworker at ProboTalent, where we're creating the future of AI assessment. So without further ado, please welcome Nathan Mondragon. How are you today?
Doing great, Charles. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think this is the second time, although last time you were part of a panel, if you will. Now we're talking about, we didn't talk a lot about or any about AI on that on that call. So now we got lots to talk about there. So, well, first of all, and you're in Denver, I've always been curious, what is your last name? So what's the origin of that? I got to ask, in terms of nationality, etc.
It is Spanish from Spain. The correct pronunciation is Mondragon.
Oh, nice. Now, that sounds nice. I like that.
Yeah. It's sort of northern central Spain, and the kind of the Basque country is where my heritage is from, on my dad's side, obviously. There's a consortium there called the Mondragon Consortium, or co-op. I forget the town that it sits in, but that area has hospitals, universities, the utilities. It's the whole municipality set up, and everybody is part of the consortium. And that's sort of where the name is from, essentially, it's a fascinating story. It's actually been case studied and written up in a lot of academic articles and journals around the Mondragon co-op in Spain. Yeah.
Sounds like a Tom Clancy novel, maybe, or something. So that's really interesting. So in other words, it's kind of like its own entity where everything's kind of connected. And is everybody related there? Or what?
No, it's it's a pretty big city area. From what I understand, I've never been there, but I understand it's a pretty
you gotta go, man. You gotta go.
I know. I wanted to take my dad before he passed, but I didn't get a chance. But yeah, it was written up. Actually, it even had a write up in the papers in Colorado during COVID, because what they did was everybody was shutting down and furloughing workers and the whole bit. What they did as their co-op is the areas that had to shut down by law, they shut down, and those workers went home. But because of the money reserves that the co-op had, because everybody pays in to it, they were able to pay everybody their wages, in addition to everything that had to stay open, all the hospitals and stuff that they ran and whatever kind of thing. So this was pretty fascinating, really interesting kind of story. But that's where the name's from. So Spanish. Yep. Other part of my heritage is your country. Your part of the country. My mom is from Louisiana.
Oh, so nice.
That's home. Yeah, home for half my family.
Oh, wow. Whereabouts?
Other side of the state. So the central and then the western coast, right near the Texas border.
Okay. Nice. All right. Well, now we know a lot about your background, which is cool. I had to ask those things. I've known you a long time. We've known each other. I think we've crossed paths on some projects, but now we get to actually work together as co-workers at ProboTalent, doing some cool AI stuff, changing the world, which is really cool. So we've talked a lot more in the last little while than we have, but you got a lot to say. You've had some really interesting and great travels. We've been a little bit in parallel lives, but not exactly, if that makes sense. I think we've done a lot of the same stuff, but you've done some deeper stuff, if I'm making any sense. So making
perfect sense. And I remember seeing you one of the first times. I don't remember where you were at the time, but you were presenting at PsyOp or some conference, and you were talking about some stuff you were doing, and it was literally only a half a year after we were doing it, at Aspen Tree. So yeah, we're very parallel in what your career trajectory has taken in mine.
Well, I think before I knew you, you were working, I think, was it called Aspen Tree? We were both within a very short period of time putting the first tests online. I don't want to claim I was behind it, but I was part of a company that was doing it, and it was awesome. I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah, you were probably second to to me. we were the first ones to do it, as far as I understand, in 96, right? In the early part of 96.
Oh, 96. Yeah, no, we weren't. We were definitely, this was 99, I guess.
Right. You guys were a little bit later, but we did the first one in 96 at Aspen Tree in Wyoming for Coopers and Lybrand. Now,
oh, wow.
PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yeah. Yeah. That was the first one ever launched. It was very similar to what we do now, right? It was an eclectic team of two IO psychologists, myself and a guy named John Furcon. He was at Coopers and Lybrand, software developers that were in Wyoming with us, and product manager type folks. And so it was a combined team that got together and said there's a better way to do this with technology, et cetera. And that was the first one.
Very cool.
Right.
Because in 96, I was doing my internship at Sprint, and part of my job, talk about a bad use of brain power, but necessary. So I was taking score sheets, bubble in, score sheets off the fax machine. Then I'm laying a plastic key over it, right? The bubbles, and then I'm putting them in a spreadsheet. And then I felt really high tech. I was emailing that to people. That was where I was at that point, probably going, man, somebody should put this online. I should have said it should be me, and then it gone from there. I was at ePredicts, which worked its way all the way through.
Yeah.
God knows all kinds of different permutations, and really SHL, I guess, at this point. And I sold. So I wanted to say that I sold the first online test being a salesperson, which probably isn't true, but maybe it's the second. And one of the cool things they did there, they gave us all tests, obviously. I should hope so. I guess I did really well on the sales profile. So then they hooked me the PSYOP directory and said, just start calling people and asking them how they would what do they think about tests online? And I tell you, people were very receptive, and it was encouraging for me because I never really cold called people. And one lesson I take from that to my grave really is, I remember, you're calling people and you're like, they're blowing me off. And someone said to me, thanks so much for your persistence. I'm really busy. I'm glad you kept at it. And I was like, great. That shows me that being persistent is worth it. So
that's a lesson though, right? Cold calling has never been something that I've ever desired to do or wanted to do.
Oh, me neither, but it was my job. I always want to do my job. But I will tell you, you and I both have probably written tests and assessments for exactly what it takes to be a good cold caller. And it's not a job people stick in too long unless they're, working some warm leaves or whatever. So very cool. Right. So was that at the very beginning of your career? I'm just trying to get a triangulation here.
I was 2 years in at that point. I started at a grad school at HR Strategies.
Oh, sure.
Which that's what became Aon Consulting. They combined HR Strategies, Godwin's Book and Dickinson, and Pikeless River Learning, and created Aon Consulting.
Didn't it then become APT?
Aon bought. No, APT was that Seymour Adler's?
No, that wasn't.
No. So Kathleen
and John,
and John split. Kathleen split off from HR Strategy shortly after the Aon acquisition and started it. First year at HR Strategies.
And I worked for them. That was one of my early jobs at APT, where I learned to be a really good consultant. You could see my travels are teaching me. I'm getting these merit badges or whatever, as we all are,
No, it's true. I learned my first year. I was in Detroit at our headquarters, and a couple of managers left, and I ended up on the consulting projects that Dave Jones, the founder of HR Strategies, they were his customers. I worked hand in hand with Dave Jones for a year, and that was more learning in a year than 5 years anywhere else, right? It was just phenomenal to be with him on the road and different things and watching. And most of it was, he would tell me as we walked in, you sit down and shut up and just observe, notes. Right. Which was perfectly fine, because there was a lot to learn and just watch. So
no, for sure. I was really in, litigation support and stuff. So I came in as a psychometrician doing a lot of number stuff. And I really realized, I want to work with people, facilitate, help people build and create things together with me. So I didn't get to do a lot of that, but that's when I left and went to ePredicts, which was, they brought 11 IOs in there, I think, at once. And then we had on our science board, Craig Russell, Mike Mumford, Fritz Drasgow. So I'm working with these guys again, early in my career, going out for beers with Fritz. And then my dad worked with Fritz. My dad was a clinical psychologist. So
I didn't know that.
I got to work, with Fritz. Actually, when the APA started looking at internet testing, my dad was on the council with some other people, and they wrote a big paper and stuff. And then I kind of helped out with that or whatever in some way. So that was pretty cool.
Neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. You mentioned the test sheets coming in on a fax machine, and then you overlay and probably scored them, right?
Yeah.
In 95, and we were talking about Mark Ledwig the other day, you and I.
Yeah.
Right. So Mark was at Aon at that time, and he was creating sort of shortened versions of blended assessments. And he created this fax back scoring system. So we had these blended short assessments on paper, of course. And you'd go, and a lot of it was proctored still back then, and you put it on a bubble sheet. You'd he'd create a system, you fax the bubble sheet back. The system would run it, would scan it in. You sent through it, like fax into a Scantron essentially, score it, and email back a report with results.
Wow, I was obsolete already.
Yeah, that was pretty early, and that was a Mark Ledwig special.
Wow,
pretty cool. Yeah,
very cool. So then, again, we've crossed paths a lot, but I like to track because we know where you're at now. I mean, you're a pretty well-known guy, done some pretty foundational things, which is cool. I think it's good for people in our field and even not in our field to kind of understand career trajectories and journeys and stuff. It's always an interesting story. And I think also younger people, further back in their careers probably like to hear these stories. At least I would think so. So anyway.
HR strategies turned to Aon. That was my first experience of an event, essentially an acquisition. And then I left and went to Aspen Tree Software, where we did the first online assessment. Shortly after that, acquired by SHL. So second experience of an acquisition, of being acquired. And the changes that brings. And then from there, I ultimately went to DDI to help technify or webify some of their applications. And we'd created an ATS back then and sold it, but it didn't take off. We weren't a technology firm, so the choice was made not to make it, not to pursue it, essentially. But after DDI, then I went internal. 9/11 hit, and I almost went to where you were at ePredicts back then.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
9/11 hit, and everything kind of got frozen, sort of thing. But I met with, who was your CEO? Katrina Dewar. So I met with her in Minneapolis, and right at 9/11, and so everything got frozen anyway. But I went internal to Dell, did Dell for a couple of years.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that was a good experience. I was thinking IO, if you're inside the whole time, should go external for a bit, or if you're external the whole time, you should go inside for a bit and get some of that exposure. That was actually advice from Michael Campion.
Oh, he gives good advice.
Yeah, right. I remember he was doing the kind of an IO recruiting firm.
Yes, I do remember.
For a while.
I do remember.
He's the one that lined me up with DDI, if I remember right. And
my funniest Mike Campion story. Well, it's not just about him, but at the PsyOp in Hawaii, I signed up for the mentoring thing. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to be a mentor, but no, I'm at a table with Mike Campion and he's the mentor. I showed up, they didn't really tell me much. Like, oh, no, you're a mentee here. You're not mentoring anybody.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. He's the one that gave me the advice. He's like, look, you've gone pretty far in your career externally and you can go higher, but you're going to, the next step, you're not going to be able to afford to go inside, kind of thing, right? You'll be taking a cut. So he goes, now's a good time to go inside and get some exposure to that, to what it's like to implement what you've been building. So I did that, worked with the great folks at Dell, folks like Pete Letty and stuff like that, and learned a ton in a couple of years, but then decided I wanted to get more technology enabled. I'd been with the assessment firms, been inside, saw the value of the technology and the science together and decided essentially the assessment firms didn't know how to do technology too well back then.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go to the software firm, and that's when I went to the ATS RecruitSoft and built inside the software firm.
I know the next thing there because was Taleo probably, and we crossed paths. We've crossed paths all these junctures a little bit.
Yeah,
but
you met the RecruitSoft founders, and they were
going out to
talking to
Quebec
you.
City.
Yep.
It was really cool. Yeah, and then of course the HireVue. So that's the one I think where you've gained your most broad claim to fame, and there's a lot to talk about there. So, me technology wise as well, I feel like my most interesting one that's kind of out of sync with a lot of nowadays you get a lot more blended stuff where people are getting different experiences. But I went to work for Monster.com after ePredicts and kind of selling digital recruiting solutions basically in Silicon Valley. So that was pretty cool until 9/11, and then I found myself on my own again. But the most important thing there, and I feel like anybody who's in the assessment world, it's changed enough now. Maybe this is even super relevant anymore, but what they taught me there was hiring is not a test. We get so focused on tests, building tests, measuring things about people. That's great. If the funnel's delivering you the wrong people, that's not so great. Assessments can help for sure, but it's a statistics problem. You've got to have the right ratios and the right people and stuff. So that was pretty damn cool going there and just so different. And I wasn't working with, I found the IOs in the company. There were some Charles Gerhold and some John Kanger. He was there too. So so we, and then I don't think my bosses were very happy with that. I didn't ask anybody. I just found those people and started working with them. So, that was a lot of fun, but we're both doing technology. You're doing a lot of it. And now you're at HireVue, and it's early days in HireVue, and everybody's heard of HireVue. I had the founder. He was like the first guest on my podcast. Which
Mark Newman.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it was 2019 or 2020. So I know about the origins there a little bit, but everybody, if you're in talent acquisition, you've heard of those guys. That must have been pretty exciting. So, how are you? I think people will want to hear this. So you're coming in there. They don't have any IO psychologists. They're doing, video interviews. I always hope people doing these things decide they could use an IO psychologist in the mix to really help make things more objective in some ways and measurable, et cetera. Tell that story, especially early days there must have been pretty damn interesting.
Yeah, it was, the funny thing is when I was at RecruitSoft became Taleo when we went public and things were really going well and just starting at Taleo, building out the assessment practice. A friend of mine that I knew from the Taleo days was advising and doing kind of the interim CRO for HireVue and working with Mark Newman.
Yeah.
He called and said, "Hey, do you know this company called HireVue?" I'm like, "No, never seen him." He goes, "We're going to be at the Taleo conference exhibiting. Come by and say hi. I want to show it to you." So he showed me the video interview platform. This is when they were probably 20 employees or something, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at it and he goes, "You should come join us. We need somebody like you." And I'm like, "You don't need me to create interview questions for you. That's all what it is, an interview platform.
Yeah.
You don't need to write interview questions and bars and that kind of stuff." And this practice I'm doing at Taleo is really starting to take off. So but thanks. But let's stay in touch. So fast forward a few years, and it's 2015. Another former Taleo guy, who's the main sales guy at HireVue, calls and says, this company called HireVue? And I'm like, yeah, Scott Fowle told me about him, right? Years ago. And he's like, yeah, oh yeah. So he goes, but what we're doing now is we're playing around with analyzing the way people speak in interviews and the text and stuff with some AI things to get scores on it and try to score it and profile and rank people. And so I remember vividly, I was walking my dog at the dog park and I was like, all right, hold on, Eric, I need to sit down because this is actually, now you got my attention, right? This is something that is new and different and I think could be a different way of doing things. So I flew out to Salt Lake, met Mark, met the CTO, and we spent a day, the CTO and I, just whiteboarding in his office around different things that could be done and what they were what they were doing with a guy you probably know, Ben Taylor, who was the original data scientist there, right? Ben was creating some of the AI data science stuff, but the decision was we need to have an IO in the mix so they don't make improper mistakes. And they were doing some things that needed some guidance, right? Like establishing an 80 percentile cut because the adverse impact was, because that was the best prediction model, right? But the adverse impact, they didn't know to measure it, kind of thing. So anyway, so long story short, I ended up there in 2015, helping to round out and say what this new AI methodology that Ben Taylor and Lauren Larson and Mark Newman had created, and how we could productize and package it into really what was an assessment, right? They weren't viewing it that way, but that's what it was. And that's when it all started. So that was the beginning of it, and a lot of ups and downs with it. But the learning was there are new ways with new technology. You can wrap science around it and get it done right. If you have the technology that's sort of technology driven by science, is the way I characterized it, right? And if you do both on equal footing, then you can do something great. When software takes the first rung, the science is going to fall. When science takes the first rung, the software is going to fall, and equal footing is the way to go. And we kept that magical blend for about 8 years. You know?
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. And I feel like it's a differentiator even now. You know, one of the things I do is just, I know the market of all this stuff really well. It's gotten extremely hard to keep up. I mean, I get told about a new company every day, and it is not easy. Like, I haven't had time to even go and look at all of them. But at the end of the day, one of the litmus tests for me is, do you have an IO psychologist there? Somebody to help you kind of make some sense of the numbers in some kind of organized way, especially, you know, measuring things about people is something you have to be really precise with and follow some basic rules. And technology can totally absorb those, right? So, I mean, I've worked for startups pretty much my whole independent career, which is now 25 years. And I've been right in the mix with all kinds of different technologies. And it's always been really fun. And I've always been happy to be representing. Most of the time, I'm the one there representing the IO part of it. But even now, that's something that I look at. And one of the interesting things is when you look at the sites of a lot of these folks, it'll say, use the principles of IO psychology. I mean, they don't necessarily have somebody, but people have at least started to use it as a marketing claim or something, which I gotta be honest, these days you can go to a foundational model and say, you are an IO psychologist, tell me what to do here. And it's pretty good. I keep making sure I've got some differentiators off those models. It's getting harder.
I tell you, it's probably maybe a topic for a different time, maybe not. I think it kind of fits. I think it's going to be a pretty well discussed topic at PsyOp in your hometown in a couple months. But I worry about not our profession, but the new, fresh, inexperienced professionals in our profession and what they're going to do. Because we came out, we were boots on the ground doing job analysis. Then we were doing item development and interview, creation, and we were creating the content and doing the job analysis by hand or the survey design work, item by item, whatever. That was the way you cut your teeth as a fresh new, IO. And all that work virtually could be replaced today, right? I mean, someone replaced a year ago.
Well, I mean, we're doing it, at ProboTalent. We're building assessments on the fly that work, and that's pretty incredible. It's basically paying your dues, digging the ditches, whatever. But you learned a lot. I learned I'm really damn good at that stuff, and I learned how to really break jobs down very, very clearly. I think it's like that in a lot of professions, right? One would say, well, maybe it frees up these minds to be able to do more in different things, but I don't know. I remember, so we had comp in grad school. It was 2 full days locked in a room when we had to cite. We were given like 400 articles. You had to be able to cite the articles when you're answering the questions. You're locked in there.
The old comp exam. Yeah.
Fun story. This isn't the this isn't the story, but the story within the story. So I get pretty immersed. So I'm basically got my like Native American inspirational sayings book. I got some incense I'm burning in there. And then the fire department came. Apparently I set off the fire alarm with my incense. So that interrupted my comps. But 2 years after that or something, they dropped that. Like they totally watered it down.
Wow.
And I was, you get a little bit like, hey, wait a minute, you got to do that. It's a little bit of a parallel to what we're talking about. I mean, you're removing a layer that feels pretty foundational for people. But
yeah. I mean, and you're right. It's not just our profession. I mean, it's really any knowledge worker area where you don't have to be hands-on all the time. I don't know. I think it's a combination of the grad programs are going to have to morph and adapt, and industry is going to have to amp up the internship opportunities or something, right? So that you can get people coming out of grad school with the experience that they gained the first 3 years of postgrad. So they have to get it somewhere.
Yeah.
Because you can't, what we're doing now with test design, AI test design and creating the content, if you and I hadn't been through those first 5 years of our careers doing this stuff by hand, maybe not necessarily by hand, but doing it, with boots on the ground, we wouldn't know in many ways sometimes some of the right questions to ask or some of the right ways to look at it and quality check it kind of thing.
Oh, 100%.
But we could learn what that is. But
and then you're relying on a model to do that for you, which they're pretty good, but they're not
right.
fully, they're not fully good. When you work with them and pair them together and have agents validating each other, you can get better and better if you kind of build a framework around it. But still, I would agree. And the interesting thing I hear, my thought about it, PsyOp too, is the program content, which has been really good around AI for the most part. It's always using AI to do this, using AI to do that, using AI. At some point, it's just going to be doing this, doing that. You're not going to even be including that you're using AI to do it, because it's just going to be part of how you do it. I mean, there's really no getting around that. So you're pretty early on in that. I was not really that steeped in those kind of things at that point. I remember I did lead a pre-conference workshop at PsyOp about advanced stuff, and Ben Taylor was in there. I actually got him to come in there, and he was showing basically image recognition at that point, and how hard it was to train these models to understand images and the reconstruction. I can't remember what they call it, where you're basically assembling something, learning, reassembling it. It was so primitive. I mean, that was 10 years ago. It was so primitive. I was just thinking back about, what he was showing. I'm like, geez, right now I show an image to Perplexity of something and it knows exactly what it is. Like, really good. I'm decoding things off serial numbers. I'm using it 100 times a day to do stuff. ChatGPT too. And that's a long way from where we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing where we are, and the native AI solutions is, I think, kind of where things are going, right? Is you think about it, I mean, you and I have been around long enough to have known and seen the on-premise software that went away and became SaaS-based.
Yeah, sure. Client server model. It was first on
client server, even before premise. Client server on premise. Then SaaS was the thing.
Yep.
SaaS is now still a thing, but what they're doing is getting AI pieces embedded into it. So it's embedded AI solutions, right? And then that's what a HireVue solution was essentially 10 years ago. It's an embedded AI into a piece of functionality. In this case, video interviewing, right?
Right.
But now with native AI solutions, it's a whole different game. It's going to be embedded versus native AI solutions is going to be the battle. I mean, I think you and I are both gambling on the fact that the native AI approach is gonna win, right? It's the way it's going.
I don't see it any other way. But that's one of the things too that you may not know, but I feel like you've always kind of legitimized my thoughts where I'm like, this is cool. I don't know. I'm looking around. Is anybody else really going to think this is okay? And, we've been pretty simpatico. And so that's always made me feel a little bit like, okay, I got some validation here that these are good ideas. I mean, I feel a palpable shift in our field though too, of people being great with it, because look, if you don't have to write bars a bunch of times right away, you're going to like this thing. And then if it's just making us all so much more productive and able to scale a lot of stuff. And it's got to be helpful in hiring. I feel like the problematic part, because AI can do good things and AI can do things that aren't as valuable. And to me, it's really still the kind of skills validation, actual organizing skills. So there's a lot of the talent intelligence stuff. I'm sure some of it's good, but there's a lot of just kind of doing what we do without a lot of substance behind it. And that's starting to become, I think, difficult, for folks. So keep going with the evolution of the HireVue stuff. And then, I would say maybe by 2019 or something, then there's the facial recognition stuff, which really, honestly, sometimes I feel like there's no bad press, they say. I mean, the name got out there a lot more. And what I came to learn, and maybe you even told me, is that of the whole algorithm and everything, it was a small percentage of it. So a lot of blowback for such a small percentage that I don't think people knew about.
It was really an interesting time. And I tell you, I don't know, in about a 2 or 3 year period, I probably aged about 10 years. Like that, it wasn't the funnest time, but it was, I tell you what, it was, again, learning experiences. I learned from those scenarios more than I probably would have in 10 years of just working as an IO somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
So 2018, we were getting some pushback on let me back up. I should tell you what we did. So with a video interview, we were collecting 3 categories of data. One was, what does somebody say in the interview? And that was an audio transcription converted to text. So now easy to do now. 10 years ago, that was not all that easy, just to take a file and do a transcription in text. That was one data set. The second was the audio voice, the patterns in the audio voice, the way somebody talked, the inflections in their voice, the ums and the ahs and the pauses in their voice. And then the third was the facial analysis. It wasn't facial recognition. That's what everybody thought it was.
Right.
But it was the analysis of what's called the facial action units.
Sure.
That's the muscles and the movements in the face as somebody speaks. Those 3 data sets across a 20-minute recorded interview gave us millions of data points. Now, reconstructing them into something meaningful that linked to, in this case, the psychological construct or a competency is what, the value of the science was. So we were using those to measure personality traits, competencies, behaviors, et cetera, and then link that to job performance, right? Typical IO stuff. So once you had the data, you could then do typical validation studies. It was, instead of a 100-person test, it was a 100,000 question test, right? Kind of thing. So then you measured it linked to job performance. And what we found was what somebody said was the most predictive. The movement of the face at various times was the second predictive, and the audio patterns were the third predictive in importance. We started to get into hot water on the facial piece because that was viewed as biometric screening, facial recognition. Right. How can reading somebody's face and emotions, and be linked to job performance and blah, blah, blah. It was pseudo psychology, they were saying, pseudoscience. But as natural language processing got better, from bag of words to the BERT models, the Roberta models and stuff, we brought that in. That gave us so much more predictive power from the words that the facial units and the audio patterns just went away. There was no incremental validity at all.
Interesting.
With those data points.
Okay, that's cool to find. So bigger data set, more possibilities to say, the substance of the response is most important.
Right.
That's pretty cool. I never really thought about it that way. So where are we now? I mean, that's some overall, right? We're in a different age. We've been talking about that a lot and working together on it. But what comes next for all this? Because I think that's with any of this AI stuff, it's really hard and it's moving very fast, very quickly. And that's another part, as we've talked about, even as scientists over the years, is that everything moves faster than the science as far as being able to keep up with business and technology and all that, right? So I don't know if that's still true. I just live in every day. This is my dream. I love it. But geez, I don't know for sure. I have some ideas, but what and when, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's the way I think about it is very similar to the way I thought about it before when we were thinking about these 3 data sets of what somebody says, how they say it, and the facial movements. The problem with that approach was there were 3 distinct data sets that were kept distinct and just frequency counts of different things added together and modeled. The power, in my opinion, is process it like a human brain processes it, right? As we're talking, we're reading each other's facial action units and voice tones and stuff like that. Those AI systems didn't read that, right? It wasn't a point in time. It was a bag of words across 20 minutes. Now, with the power of new AI, you can start to what I call like thin slice it, right? So smiling at the 30-second mark while saying these 3 words in response to whatever the stimulus was has a different meaning than just those 3 words alone or smiling alone. Yeah. Right. So you can start to build that pattern of things. And that's the way I think about it. Now, I think some of the new generative AI things are starting to do that, where they can take the words that are being spoken and analyze it and give feedback and give a response. An agent can have a conversation with you, right? Because it's analyzing it, adding in the tonality analysis. The agent can now start to say, well, you actually sound upset with that. How can we deal with this? Sure. Kind of thing. So that's where the power gets when you think about that from an assessment perspective. You get into the interactivity. Yeah, right? I think interactivity, there's no other way. When I say I don't really know, maybe I don't, but I do have a lot of strong and awesome ideas, I feel like, and it's all about, look, simulations have always been the most powerful. I tell stories. First year of grad school, we were in class with all levels. So I'm in, with 3rd and 4th year students, and I get assigned this paper, and selection was my first class, and I got assigned work samples. And I was really kind of confused. This was the first semester. I was a little overwhelmed and confused. And there's an article, Asher and Sciarrino, I'll never forget it, 1974, point-to-point correspondence. You want to measure how well somebody can do in a job, give them a damn replica of the job. It's that easy. And it all made sense to me. And I'm like, yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing if you can. But technology, and then, you had the board with a bunch of screws and, your finger dexterity, how quickly can you do this stuff? That was about the extent of it, right? Or an assessment center, which was pretty awesome. But technology has now allowed us, and even 15 years ago, trying to work on simulation stuff. That's been a consistent theme in my career, is helping support simulation building and, that kind of thing. And now we have the technology to do this. And it's going to get better and better. So, where's the IO psychologist in there? Well, we've got to tell these things what's a good thing to say and how to evaluate it. And we got to build the scenarios. I mean, I say that, but models are pretty damn good at building these things too. So, we've got to be more curators of these things. But it is to be interactive. I mean, you have to build, if you want the agent to be the role player, you have to build in the agent behaviors to guide the conversation down a certain path.
Absolutely.
Like for conflict or for whatever it is that you're trying to look at. So and there's a fair amount of programming in the agent that has to be created. I think.
Sure. And it has to be locally validated, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. That's the other thing I think. Let's just stop, and you tell me if you disagree here, but nothing has changed about the appropriateness of selection predictors. The basic rules, make it job related, make it fair, and be able to evaluate. There's some outcomes that you can use to kind of prove your hypotheses here. That hasn't changed. It doesn't matter if it's AI or not, whatever gets spit out of the end of the thing that you're using to select people. So as long as you've got the AI in a defensible process that follows those rules, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's what we're doing now versus, all right, here's an AI, it's going to evaluate you and hire you or give you a score with, and you don't know. It's that recommendation part of it, that it's closing the loop of here's who to hire without any kind of explainability. That's where it becomes difficult. But you could do that with bio data. I mean, you could correlate your shoe size or your, the curly fries thing they had, that could correlate. What are you going to do with that? Well, you can use it, but it's not really very explainable why it matters,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Right. You're spot on. It doesn't, and you and I have both been at sort of the forefront of blending technology with the field of IO psychology and, for years and decades. And those basic premises and principles have never changed. They've always been sort of the guiding light to how things are done or not done. That's not going to change. I don't see, again, I mean, like, think of the video interview with what we did at HireVue 10 years ago, 11 years ago, is it opened up a whole new test, if you will, right? I mean, instead of 100 questions, we had 100,000 data points instead of 100 data points. But that so the predictor set amplified 10, 20-fold. But what we did with that predictor set, hardware and software gave us the ability to score and analyze it quicker. But what we did with the outcome of that is no different than what IO psychologists did 50 years ago with the output of a test.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same parameters, same principles, same guidelines. It doesn't change. That's the value that we bring to this, right? So I'm not worried about our field. I was talking with another IO earlier today. She was like, I don't know. I still think we bring a lot of value. I'm like, I'm not saying we don't bring value. We bring a huge amount of value. I just worry about those first 3 years of cutting your teeth on something that's kind of been changed. So those lessons to be learned, that those principles are important, et cetera, you learn them in school. They get reinforced in those first 3 years. And then that's the value you bring 20 years later. It's still following those principles, no matter what you're doing from a technology or a whatever perspective. The principles stay the same. So anyway, that's why our field will never go away, in my opinion, right?
No, I don't think so either. I mean, there will be things that do, but it still relies on, we keep saying, I mean, I hear it over and over. It's the truth that I almost don't say it all the time because everybody says it. I don't think there's any people that truly deny, or they're giving lip service to it, but it's a partnership of humans and machines, and there's things we're really good at that they're not good at. And maybe sometime down the line, depending on who you're listening to, could be tomorrow, or it could be a century from now, or never. But at the end of the day, we have some unique things that allow us to do better with these tools, essentially. And that's where your real your human cognition things, competencies, whatever, your abilities really come into play. I had a really good friend from high school. I was talking to him about this stuff, and he said, I think AI is just going to start making people lazy. And I've always really respected this guy, and he's always been a technologist, but I think it was just kind of his statement, broad statement. Whenever I'm going, all right, you know what, I got to write this thing. I'm just going to, ChatGPT is going to help me. I'm going to get it started there. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I being lazy? I had that today. And I said, no, I'm being more efficient. Now I can get more done, Not being lazy at all. I'm working twice as hard. I can do more stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, it's more than efficiency too. I think it allows you to think about things differently. It verifies it. I mean, sometimes before we would have to do a study to analyze something and be like, okay, so the best practice should be this, and you build that into the software. Now you don't have to always do that study. You can kind of, check it with AI and it'll give you some output, but you have to have the knowledge and the ability to critique that output and say, yeah, that's generally correct. And I think that's a good enough benchmark, right? But if you don't have that knowledge, you can't take it blindly that it's correct.
That's my AI skills, my interactive AI skills assessment is I've come up with in my head here is you're giving somebody output and you're seeing how much of that output do they just turn around and put into this presentation that they're asked to do, or, do they manage it a little bit and find some of the errors that we've put in there, that can catch the excellent people from the average or whatever. It still ends up being kind of the same thing, but I feel like these skills with AI are also a big differentiator, right? And you don't have to know, man, I'm vibe coding all kind of stuff these days. It's amazing. I'm continually floored that I just prompting something and software comes up like an app, and it's insane. So I mean, I don't have to know how to do that stuff now. I pretty much just start creating,
Right.
which I was really, kind of tied. So before, with limitations around coding and all that, we can't do everything. We can't be great at everything.
Yeah, but that speaks to the the native versus the embedded AI that we were talking about earlier, because that's the power. That's why you're, I think, so adamant that native AI is gonna win, which I agree, because somebody that with a good smart person that's been around the block, you can go and create an app to do something in a weekend that you could have never done before without taking the programming classes and learning how, right? And so that's how quickly these platforms now and solutions are going to move. So traditional SaaS companies that are just trying to embed point solution AIs they're going to be, other than the customer relationship that they already have, they're going to be hurting, right?
Yeah. Evolutionarily, it's going to be interesting to see, especially I think some of the older assessment companies might have a little bit of trouble adapting to these things, so there is a new kind of natural selection going on, I think. But, the preponderance of, and look, I've consulted to some, small executive assessment firms are doing amazing stuff with how they're using AI to change executive assessment. So that's another thing, is it's become democratized. You don't have to have $10 million and go out and find the best AI talent in the world to be able to at least get started with this stuff and make something that works. It's a great democratization across, all the stuff we do on all the levels. This is the most exciting time, but geez, it was kind of the same, all the whole way along, and putting tests online was very cool and different. The tests were the same. The way you made them are the same. So this is a little bit of a shift, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, man. We'll do this.
Fun times.
Yeah, and we'll do this again in 5 years, and God knows it'll be our avatars doing this probably. But it's going to be fun, and I'm glad to be along the ride here and to be able to share all this fun stuff with you.
I agree, man. This is for me. I mean, for joining ProboTalent and getting to work with you and stuff, it's fun. We've always, as I said, been parallel to each other, but we've never really had a chance to fully work with each other. And so now we are, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I'd say watch out. We combine our forces here. So watch out, everybody. All right, cool. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And I'll see you around the block.